What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Make It Custom. I'm Carl Fisher, and today we are back on the 1931 Model A Roadster project. We've got that beautiful 401 nailhead motor that we've just set in there. We made some motor mounts, tranny mounts the last time we were on this project, and now we're going to try and work on the steering. The steering does not fit the same way it did. We're going to have to shorten the steering column. We're going to have to add another U-joint at least, and figure out our way around that big, beautiful nailhead motor. So that is the video. Don't forget to like, click subscribe, hit notifications, and let's get into this episode of Make It Custom. All right, so if you have not been with us for the entire project here, or if you just need a little refresher, this is a cross steering setup on a straight axle. So we've got, I think it's a Super Bell drop axle. This is a Brizio chassis. I did not build this chassis. I've made a couple of brackets on it, but it's a very basic hairpin setup with just some short shocks, a monoleaf spring. Monoleaf, of course, just means that there's one leaf or a transverse leaf, or sorry, I might have that backwards. A monoleaf is actually kind of what's on, I think this is what Dan's using. That's actually technically a monoleaf, where it's actually just one tapered forged leaf. So that's not what this has. I don't want to confuse anybody. This is just a transverse leaf like stock kind of on just like vertical perch pins, hairpin radius rods, and yeah, very, very basic stuff. You know, from the factory, they would have probably had that cross or that push-pull steering. So now this has a Vega box, which is a cross steering setup, meaning that the spindles are connected here and there, and then we're steering off of the passenger side spindle. So it's a cross steer setup, a little bit less bump steer that way. But that is what that box is. That is a Vega steering box, one of the most common hot rod steering boxes ever. So we are trying to keep that situation while doing this engine swap. So what I'm looking at right now, let's see if I get a little bit of light in here for you guys. Okay, so I want to see how close I can get to the starter, see where it's going to clear things. We are going to go to a, instead of the block hugger type exhaust that we had on that small block Chevy, we're probably going to go to a Lakester style manifold, which for this, they do not come pre-made, I don't believe. So we're going to be ordering a kit, which will have the exhaust flange on it and a bunch of bends and then a tapered tube to do that Lakester style header. And then we'll tie back into our 2-inch exhaust that's already there, because there's just the 2-inch stainless exhaust was already done. So anyway, we're also probably not going to run a hood side, being that it's now a Buick nailhead. Part of the reason why we were going to run a hood side was just because a small block Chevy is so ordinary. But now this is kind of like a little bit more special drivetrain that you'd kind of want to see in there. Anyway, we're not going to run a hood side, so we want interesting looking exhaust, interesting looking motor, that kind of thing. So Lakester style header it is. That will also make it much easier space-wise for remounting things, because no doubt those block hugger headers would have hit this steering as well. So anyway, that's why we are making the decisions we're making. So what I'm hoping to do is run this right through, like directly through this, as if I could drill a hole on a perfect angle through multi-layers of sheet metal and sink maybe a piece of tubing in here that has a bronze bushing on the inside. So essentially that will be our steady bearing. So if this could come through like this last pipe could just barely clear it. We might have to notch it a little bit or do something just to get it around the steering a little bit, because it's important we keep that tube as high up as possible so that we have a good steering angle going back to our column. You remember our column clamps there, and it would have clamped here as a straight column, and then our joint was below here, like where this motor is. So What we're gonna have to do now, if I wanted to come through into the car here with that bushinged sleeve, is that we'll end up with another U-joint on this side, steering joint on this side, directly against the kick panel of the floor, and then we will have to angle back to the column and have another U-joint or steering joint here. So that becomes a 3-joint system. You would have one here, one at the floor, and then the one on the steering box, which is totally fine. That's actually really nice to only have 3. So, but what does that mean? That also means that the column has to be shortened by like a foot so that you can still have a good steering angle. That also means that up here, we will have to have some reinforcement to hold the bottom of the column in midair up here. So we're gonna have to design some kind of bracketry to go, you know, from the floor, which has some 10-gauge structure already. It's gonna have to, you know, be tied into the firewall and then into this column brace that will be here because we're gonna have another U-joint. It's not ideal to have that much extra fab work, but I do believe it's really not that bad. A lot of times you would have those extra braces tying in your column to your firewall, to your floor, or your column to your firewall, to your dash, so that you would have structure for a firewall brake system. So it's not uncommon to have to fabricate all that stuff anyway. So I think we're in good shape also because our brake, it actually clears. Like, we don't have to do anything with the brake. It gets, you know, right to the floor before it hits the motor, so it's in a good spot. So I think that's the plan, is I'm gonna line this up as best I can. I'm gonna try and drill a hole and maybe hole saw through on that weird angle as close as I can. And then what I'll use is, I've got this steering shaft, nice stainless steering shaft. I picked that up at KMS Car Parts. If you're local, that's another spot that you can get this stuff. Same deal with the with this U-joint. They had it in stock. Ha! Come on! Ah. And yeah, they're nice. So that will be the one on the inside of the car. I've got to back these off to get that on there, obviously. But this bronze bushing, I bought that at Princess Auto, I think. But they're just common sizes. And I've got a piece of tubing here. And this is just a what they call DOM tubing. I know I'm talking a lot, but hopefully you're absorbing some of the information because I'm just going to get to work right after this. But this is what I'm talking about going through the floor, is a piece of DOM tubing. DOM means drawn over mandrel. All that means is that there is no burr on the inside or no weld seam, because tubes are made by being welded together, right? So they smooth them out. They smooth that seam out by drawing the tube over a mandrel, DOM tubing. So DOM tubing is nice because, you know, this is a 1-inch OD bushing. It's common. Princess Auto, very common. 3/4 ID, very common. And you can slide it right into a piece of DOM tubing, like, perfectly. Like, it's not going to drop out of there. It's not tight by any means. Like, you could use a little bit of green Loctite, or what I've done in the past also is just ball peened it, or use set screws, or whatever. There's ways to lock the bushing in there, and it's just easy to fabricate that way. So that is the plan right now. I'm just going to line up that hole, drill through there, bring, you know, a hole saw to sink a piece of tube through there. Essentially, you're not even going to see this. I can make it flush on both sides, or I could leave a little bit of it out there and get a nice weld around it. But basically just a small chunk of tube with the bronze bushings in there, and then our steering joint on the other side. Then we're going to shrink the column and make some brackets. Okay, sorry for talking too much, but let's get after it. So just to explain what's going on, this I assume is, well, I know this is for the, basically this is an isolated contact. It's plastic on the inside. This is bronze bushing that they've used. And what they're doing is they're isolating this so that, where is it? Let me, 1 second. This is just something that we're gonna have to take into account. So this is a, basically a contact that's spring loaded here. See how I can push on that, spring loaded. And that is threaded into the side here of the column outer tube, I guess I'm gonna call it. Anyway, threads in there and it rides on that bronze bushing right here. So when you're spinning the wheel, you've got this isolated power wire that continues through, and what that is just your, it's your ground for your horn. So we've got to think about that. This is hollow, it's splined at the end. Two things we can do. We can just slip and sleeve and shorten this and keep the splines, which I think is probably the best way, because we don't have to change the U-joints that we already have. So I think what I'm gonna do is just shorten up the column to where I think it needs to be. Cut the outer tube. I'll have to test fit first, and then I'll reinstall this, this contact later. But for right now, I'm just gonna do my measurements, shorten it up, and install it back in there, and then just see what kind of room we have to play with to get a good hold on it, and how we can sort of reinforce that. That's gonna be the tough part about that situation, because we have to make that column so short, because the longer the column is, the more steering angle in the U-joint. So the shorter the column is, the more straighter of a shot we're gonna have. We won't have a ton of room to play with to reinforce. So those are the challenges that we're facing right now, but we're just gonna shorten the column, choppy chop, and give it a shot. So you see these people using these big cups. This is just like they call it a FUPA cup. That's just a brand name. What they are is a gas lens. You see how massive that is, and how it has this mesh inside? What that does is it diffuses the gas really, really well, so you get excellent coverage, which allows you to stick your tungsten out a little bit further. A lot of people really, really like that feature of it. The other beautiful thing is that you can really, really jack up the amount of flow, like gas flow. So the weld will be cooler. You know, if you're tacking sheet metal or something, and you've just got so much gas flow on it, I mean, you're wasting more gas, but it's something that it allows you to do is keep the area around your weld from heating up too much. So basically what I'm trying to do right now, I'm just gonna knock out this this key. If I've got something to pull it out with, come on here. What do I got? Get out of there. Yeah. Wow. Okay, well, I don't really want to hit this thing too hard. Come on. I gotta get this key out so that I can keep turning it in here while I'm clamping it and welding it. I just want it to be really, really straight, because what I'm gonna do, you saw I just drilled out that little piece of tubing, is that once this weld is filled up here, I'm gonna machine it down and then slip the tube over top and then rosette, like drill a couple holes in there and fill the holes. That'll be like 2 ways to, you know, steering stuff and brakes, like you just don't want to mess around. I'm sure if I weld this up, it'll never ever break, but I always double it up, you know, just for added safety. There we go. Okay, I can clamp this back in here now. Just gonna rotate it a bit, get a tack on the other side. Gonna open this back up. Yeah, see, it moved. Moved because I was banging on it. So it's a good thing we're holding it straight. We don't want a wobbly steering wheel. I'm gonna do this in multiple passes. I'm just gonna do a small pass on the root, like just kind of right in the bottom of the groove, and then we'll do a second pass to fill it up. Now I'll just make sure that nothing is sitting too high, and then we can sleeve it, rosette weld it, and that should be good. Okay, some assembly required. So I think I'm gonna need to get an idea, just test fit, where this steering wheel sits, where it wants to be when it's actually seated on this. Just kind of test fit, not super cranked down or anything, but I need to see length so I know where to tighten that shaft collar. Okay, that's obviously super floppy, but that's just because it's only being held on by sheet metal. It's just hanging off of that now. But this can give us an idea of what we're looking at for our length on this next bar. And then we can just make sure that we don't have any binding before we sort of finalize our commitment on this. Okay, that should be what I need. All right, here we go. Let's see here. So far, the steering angles to me look pretty good. This one looks a little tight. Like this is our tightest one here for sure. That one definitely looks fine. But despite the amount of movement you're gonna see here, we're just gonna have a look and see if any real binding happens. I guess I need one on this. Obviously way too long of a set screw. No binding. All right, we're in good shape. Well, there she is. Steering's in there. We are not binding. I'm very happy with the way it looks for what it is, as far as like it having to go offset and go around and have moving parts on the inside of the car. I'm not particularly super stoked on that. It isn't something that you would choose as far as design goes, over top of having just a clean column that goes through the floor like it used to be. But anyway, I think we did pretty well because we are going open hood side with this now because it's got such a beautiful engine. So we're gonna get those tapered Lakester style header kit type situation. And I just didn't want this steering to take your eye too much, right? So that's why it's just a nice, clean, straight thing that you will probably not even see because of the header that we're gonna make for it. So I'm very happy with the way it is right now, and moving on to the next step. What is the next step? I think the next step is going to be creating some kind of bracing that will go from the top of the kick boards, I'm calling this the kick boards, you know, up behind the firewall, and it will tie into the top of the cowl, possibly on these bolts or a flat plate that spreads the load. Just something so that we can have maybe like a 10 gauge thick piece of material straight up the firewall that we can brace to that column. That is the next step for me. So I'm gonna start designing that. We probably take the hood off and just get some light in there, have a look, see how I can make a structural member that will accomplish those things. We'll probably cut it out on the water jet, not the water jet, the CNC plasma, the fast cut table, and I think that'll be that. I'll be very happy to know that the steering is done, and we can move on to other things. I think the next thing we're gonna move on to is going to be the shifter. It doesn't really make sense, but it makes sense to me right now because the firewall's gone, and we can build our shifter. It's gonna be a handmade shifter that's just a very simple linkage that goes behind that waterfall on the dash, similar to a Zephyr. Look up a Zephyr shifter. We're trying to do something similar to this and just keep it clean and inside and unique. Anyway, enough babbling, back to work. We're gonna design up a little piece and a bracket to hold on to that steering column. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't go to these bolts. I'd go to these bolts. That's right. Very strong area of the cowl. It used to actually bolt to the firewall multiple places. It's double skinned, and is it double skinned? Yeah, it is. It's reinforced on the underside of these bolt holes, so it's actually nice and thick. It's got that bead roll in there. It's got this, so I don't know why I wasn't thinking about that. Probably because the hood was on. So I'm gonna create something that goes straight vertical from here and will bend in and pick up 2 of these holes, maybe even 3. I might even go for 3. 3 would be nice because I think the center one is pretty centered with the column itself. And if I make that piece out of 10 gauge, maybe I can like build a nice bracket that gets a little bit of that bent piece there and grabs the bottom of the column. Okay, so what I've got going on here right now is basically this bracket is going to fold like this. So if you're looking at the side profile, it will be like, kind of like that. So this is the firewall here, and then this will come down and grab the steering column where it's not yet supported. So if you can remember back to the steering column itself, how it's mounted, it's kind of supported up here only right now with the current dash clamp. So we're gonna create another clamp that we'll grab here. So some of these are a little bit unknown and guessed, but there's enough material there that we'll be able to get it for sure. Same thing with up here, because there's a bit of an angle to the cowl, how it rounds out. There's just a little bit of extra meat here. So this is like a trim to fit type bracket, which is okay. Like a lot of people think that when you're making a bracket on the computer that you must know all things, and you just do the best you can to have your critical measurements, and then sometimes a lot of the measurements come while you're actually drawing it in there. Or if you're doing one-off things like what we're doing, it's okay to leave meat to fit. You can cut to fit. So I'm pretty sure this bracket's gonna work out for us. This is gonna be the bend lines themselves because it's so tight together. I don't know if I'd be able to get, actually I know I wouldn't be able to get this bend to be that tight being this long. So that's why I've got the bend lines in there, and mostly like what is this bracket doing? This bracket is only holding basically up and down force, because if you can think about it, the dash itself is holding it at one spot up here. So this is the secondary spot, so now there's no flex. Now the left and right is taken care of by the dash itself because it can't go left and right, or else the dash itself would have to crumple or something, right? So the purpose of this bracket is to take away that up and down movement that we saw because of how flimsy the dash is, and we have steering joints that are allowing that movement, whereas before it was just held at the top and bottom of the column and it was solid. So hoping that this will take care of all of our play. If there is still a little bit more, we might have to have a little bit of a side anchor on our second lower mount here, but hopefully we won't need to do that. So I'm gonna go to the machine now. We're gonna cut this out and bend it up and test fit it. Okay, there it is. Just gonna give it a couple bends, weld her up, clean it up, give her a test fit. well, I'm very stoked with how that worked. We are done with the steering, and it is solid. Look at this. Right? Look at that. Woo! Anyway, very stoked that we got that bit done. That's one step closer to having this nail head motor permanently installed. I think this piece is doing its job really, really well. It's got that, this force is what it's taking up, this up-down force. The left and right is held by the sheet metal of the dash. You know, it's top to bottom kind of braced in. I've just got it tacked for now because we've got more work to do here. The next step is going to be that shifter. I'd like to build the custom shifter for it. While I have the access behind all this stuff, I think it just makes sense. And then we're gonna hammer form a wicked firewall for this. Like, I get to do over the firewall, so it's gonna be better. We're gonna do some hammer forming. It's gonna be really sweet. So thank you all for watching Make It Kustom. I'm gonna end the video here. Really stoked on the progress now that, I mean, it's like a new fire under my butt for the Roadster now that we've got that nailhead engine in it. So yeah, anyway, appreciate y'all for watching. We've got a couple new products on the site if you guys are interested. The radius gauges have been flying off the shelves. People really, really like those for the bead rolling and for whatever else. So Elio's making a bunch right now. Actually, they're gone. He just left. He took them all with him to ship them out. So if you're waiting for one, if you've ordered in the last 5 days, we are just fulfilling those orders right now, and they will be going out to you guys in the next couple of days. So anyway, japhandskustoms.com for any of that stuff. We are having a lot of fun over on Patreon if that's something you're interested in, or if you want to get some DXF files and don't want to pay for the files on the website. It's actually, you're saving a ton of money. If you even just wanted one file, you're saving an insane amount of money. Like I'm not saying to just jump on Patreon and go download all the files and then leave Patreon, but nobody's stopping you from doing that. So it is a cheaper way to get files. Anyway, catch you on the next one, everybody. Thanks a lot. We'll see you later.